that we started. So today we're going to continue the new topic that we started. We're going to move on to the first chapter of the 8th chapter, the Shemona Perakim, which is the Hagdama, the introduction to Masechet Avot, right? The ethics of our fathers. We said this whole introduction is to teach us the structure of the Nefesh, since all of ethics or all of the mitzvot come to improve our character, our ethics, which is basically improving our nefesh. All right? So the first chapter, B'nefesh ha'adam v'kochotea, right? Man's nefesh, as opposed to any other nefesh, as the animal kingdom, all animals have a nefesh, all living beings have a nefesh. V'kochotea, and its functions, the functions of the nefesh. It says, Da, you should know, Ki nefesh ha'adam, nefesh ahad. All right, first know this. Man's nefesh is one. It has many functions. It does different things, but it is a united entity. It's one thing. V'lah pe'ulot rabot, and it has many different functions. Yikara'u k'tzat pe'ulot ahen nefashot. So sometimes the different parts or the different functions of the nefesh are referred to as nefashot, or a nefesh in itself. V'yachashev ba'avur zeh sheyesh la'adam nefashot rabot, כמו שחושבים הרופאים, עד שפתח ראש הרופאים ואמר שהנפשות שלוש. He says, and because of this, because sometimes different parts or different functions of the nefesh are referred to as a nefesh themselves, some people were led to think that man has different nefashot or a few nefashot. It says, to the point where the greatest of the doctors or the physicians back then, he's most likely talking about Galinus, said that man has three nefashot. A tiv'it, as the natural one, the hiyunit, the essential one, and the nafshit, and say the spiritual one. All right? And sometimes, instead of referring to them as nefashot, they're referred to as kohot, forces or functions, or halakim, right? Halakim is parts, sections. Until some would refer to different parts of the nefesh. He says, however, the scientists of the time, the philosophers, they would usually refer to the different functions of the nefesh as either a function or a part, and not a separate nefesh. ואינם מתכוונים באומרם חלקי הנפש, שהיא מתחלקת כחלק הגופות. Right? However, when they say the parts of the nefesh, they're not referring to different parts that can be separated from the nefesh, such as like limbs on the body. Right? So the body has many body parts to it. Right, it has the hands, it has the legs, and the hand could be cut off from the nefesh, from the body. The leg could be cut off, it could be separated from the body. However, the different parts of the nefesh can't be separated from the nefesh. They're just different functions of the nefesh. ואומנם הם מונים פעולות חלוקות אשר הן לכלל הנפש, כחלקים לכל המחובר מהחלקים ההם. All right, it says, and so the different parts of the nefesh, the different functions, they're all part of the general nefesh. All right, so there is one nefesh. The nefesh has different functions. These different functions aren't separate or can be separated from the nefesh. It's still the function of the root nefesh. And soon we'll understand a little bit better what this means. What's the significance of the nefesh being one and united? ואתה יודע, this is, and you know, or by, he says, like, by now, you should know, שתיקון המידות, that correcting your midot, perfecting your character, אומנם הוא ריפוי הנפש וכוחותיה. That is essentially bringing a health to your nefesh, or making a healthy nefesh. Perfecting your character, acting, behaving properly, is the refuah of the nefesh, is a healthy nefesh. Bad behavior is unhealthy to your nefesh. So if let's say one section of the nefesh seems to be malfunctioning, let's say, it says, so what do? Okay, so you need to, the nefesh is sick. It needs to be cured. So how do you cure it? He says, well, the refuah for the nefesh is tikkun hamidot. Says perfect your character. Perfecting your character is curing the nefesh. Behaving badly is destroying your nefesh. וכמו שהרופא אשר ירפא הגופות, צריך שידע תחילה הגוף אשר ירפאהו בכללו, וחלקי הגוף מה הם. This is the same as a physician or a doctor that you go to, that he's coming to cure your body from any sickness it may have. First, he needs to know the body in general, right? You go to medical school. Before you start learning about your specific hitmahut, right? Your specialization. First, all doctors need to know about the body in its entirety. צריך שידע תחילה הגוף אשר ירפאהו בכללו, וחלקי הגוף מהם, and also needs to know the different sections of the body and how they interact with each other, how they affect each other. רצוני לומר גוף האדם, right? Man's body. וצריך שידע אילו הדברים יחלוהו וירחק מהם. And he needs to know what are the things that are unhealthy to the body in order to stay away from them, or to instruct people to stay away from these unhealthy things. ואילו דברים יבריאוהו. And what are the things that will cure it and bring health to it, sustain a healthy body? ויכוון אליהם, right? And he needs to direct people towards those things. כן, אשר ירפא את הנפש וירצה לתקן המידות, צריך שידע הנפש האדם בכללה ובחלקיה. So too, a physician of the nefesh, right? Someone, we call him either the hacham or psychologist, right? Who wants to come and help you cure your nefesh. First, he needs to understand the nefesh in its entirety and the different functions and / parts of the nefesh, and what brings health and cure to the nefesh, right? Uma yachaleh and what uma yavri'ah, right? What will cure it and what will make it sick. So he's starting off with mipnei ze omar, and so I'll make the statement here. Shechalkei nefesh hamisha. The nefesh has 5 main functions. Hazan is the metabolism. A margish is actually literally means feeling. This is the part of the nefesh in charge of the senses, right? The input that your body gets from either the light or sound, all the 5 senses that we have. V'hamidameh, this is the imaginatory faculty. V'hamitorer, this is where you have your cravings. V'hasichli, and the intellect. These are the 5 main parts of the nefesh. Now I'm sure, like me, when I studied this for the first time, I said, what? You're telling me my metabolism has something to do with my nefesh? I'm used to thinking of my nefesh as something that is, non-material, that is something that is spiritual, metaphysical. And you're telling me that my metabolism and my 5 senses, they're all part of, they're all different functions of this nefesh that I have. So what is the nefesh?
Semi, I'm sorry.
Yes, okay.
I missed one among five. One metabolism, second feeling.
We're going to go into all of them in more detail soon. Now he's just saying, what are the 5 parts? So there's the metabolism, there's the senses, there's the imagination, there's hamit ored, your cravings to do things, and also disgust and disdain to stay away from things. And the last one, hasichni, is the intellect. So what is this nefesh that's in charge of our metabolism? It's in charge of all the input that we get from our surroundings. It's in charge of our imagination. So the best mashal that I've ever heard to think of the nefesh is think of the nefesh as the operating system of the body. Every living creature, and I think we've mentioned this before in our previous classes when we've mentioned the nefesh, right? Every living creature has a nefesh. Every living creature has a metabolism. It operates differently than ours, right? But it has these functions as well. Maybe not all of these functions. And for instance, maybe some of the functions are a bit different. For instance, hamargish, the 5 senses. Some animals have different senses. And they have the software, the operating system that tells the body what to do with all the information coming in, and it also has the proper hardware for it. For instance, our sense of smell isn't the same as a dog's sense of smell, and our nose isn't the same. It has different hardware and different software to process whatever it is that we're smelling. Right? How about sonar? Some animals have sonar or radar, and we don't. They have the hardware for it, right? The body parts, the organs, the proper organs, and they also have the nefesh that can process that information. וכבר הקדמנו בזה הפרק, and we've already said, שדברנו אינם אלא בנפש האדם. All we're going to deal with here in the Shemona Perakim is the structure of man's nefesh, right? We're not going to graduate this course and become dog psychologists. We're only dealing with man, how to perfect man's nefesh. Kikoah hamazon, all right, or the Helek Hazan, depends on the translation. By the way, all this was originally written in Arabic. This is any Hebrew version you see is a translation of the original Arabic. So my original translation is Koah Hazan. Right? Koah Hamazon, derech al-mashal, ashen la'adam, eno Koah Hamazon, ashen la'hamor v'nasus. Right? So this Helek Hazan, the part of our nefesh that takes care of our metabolism, is not the same as that of an ox or a donkey or a horse, right? They each have their own metabolism. כי האדם ניזון בחלק הזן מן הנפש האנושית, והחמור ניזון בחלק הזן מהנפש החמורית, right? Because man's metabolism is operated by the חלק הזן in the human nefesh, and a donkey's Helek Hazan or metabolism is operated by the Helek Hazan in a donkey's nefesh. V'hadeken, he says the palm trees nizon b'Helek Hazan min nefesh asher lo, right? And trees and vegetation, they also have a Helek Hazan, right? Maybe they don't eat food the way we do, right? But they process the sunlight that comes in, and that's how they synthesize it using the Helek Hazan in the nefesh of a tree, a plant, whatever it is they are. ואומנם יאמר על כל אלו האישים ניזון בשיתוף השם בלבד. And this that we say metabolize or sustain right? Or eats, and we're saying it the same way man eats, and the same way an animal eats, the same way a fish eats, the same way vegetation eats. The only thing they really have in common is the word zan. Zan umfarnes lakol, right? God sustains all his creatures. We say this in the Birkat Hamazon, zan umfarnes lakol, right? But it's not the same zan. It's not the same chenek hazan. They're categorically different. The only thing they have in common is the word zan. B'shituf Hashem bilvad, right? The same name, the same term, the same verb. Lo sha'inyan ehad be'inyano. Not that it's the same thing. It's just the same word. That's because it's similar. It does something similar. You know, same way that we say that a table has legs and man has legs, right? What's the relation between the table's legs and man's legs? There's nothing. There's nothing in common except for that it's holding up the body. But a table can't always, you know, break into a run and run away if it sees something. So they're both called legs, but there's nothing in common. The only thing they have in common is the term leg. וכן יאמר על איש האדם בעל החיים מרגיש בשיתוף השם בלבד. And so too, with when we say the chenek hamargish, the part that processes the five senses, right? Also, it's not the same between us and the other animals. It's only the term margish which is in common. לא שהרגשה של בראובן היא הרגשה של בזה הסוס. Right, not that the feeling or the sensations or whatever it is that the Reuven sees would be the same as what a horse sees or how he processes the world. ולא הרגשה אשר בזה המין היא הרגשה בעינה של בזה המין האחר. And also between different species of animals, different types of animals, they each have their own unique nefesh. אלא כל מין ומין מאשר לו נפש, right? Any species of animal that has a nefesh, יש לו נפש אחת, זולת נפש האחר. It has its own unique nefesh that is different than the nefesh of any other species. והתחייבו מנפש זה פעולות. And each one of those nefashot, each nefesh of each different species has its own functions. Maybe they have more than 5 functions. Maybe they have less than 5 functions. Each function could be different, right? But it's completely different. והתחייבו מנפש זה פעולות, ומנפש זה פעולות, right? The nefesh of the sus has its own functions. The nefesh of man has its own functions. The nefesh of the fish has its own functions. ואפשר שתדמה פעולה לפעולה. And it could be that some of the functions seem similar between one nefesh and the other. ויחשב בשתי הפעולות שהן דבר אחד בעינו, ואין הדבר כן. And you would think that since they have similar, they both breathe air, right? Man breathes air, and the horses breathe air. So maybe their metabolism, their chenek hazan is the same. So it's not, it may have similarities, but they're completely different. ומשלו משל שלושה מקומות חשוכים. He says, I'm going to give you an allegory. Think of 3 different dark rooms. אחד מהם זרחה עליו השמש והאיר. In one of them, the sun rose and the sun rays came in and lit up the room. והשני, and the second one, עלה עליו הירח והאיר. Right, and the second one was lit up by moonlight. והאחר הודלק בו הנר והאיר. And the third one was lit up with a lamp or a candle. הנה כל אחד מהם כבר נמצא בו האור, אבל סיבת זה האור ופעלו השמש, ופועל האחר הירח, ופועל האחר האש. Right? So you have 3 dark rooms. All 3 of them are now lit up. It says, but the cause of the light is different between the 3. One of them lit up because of the sun. one of them is from the moon, and another one is from a candle. Ken poal hargashat ha'adam hu nefesh ha'adam. So too, right? The chelek hamargish of man, right, is the nefesh of man. The nefesh of man is what lit it up, so to speak. Is what operates it. Upoal hargashat ha'hamor nefesh ha'hamor, right? And so too, the chelek hamargish of a donkey. What's operating it? It's the nefesh of the donkey, and it's not in common with the nefesh of man. Ufal hargashat hanesher, nefesh hanesher, and that of an eagle is the nefesh of an eagle. Ve'en lahem inyani kabesam. Right? It may seem similar, but there's nothing really to put them together, to associate them together. Ela shituf Hashem bilvad. The only thing they have in common is the term nefesh, or the term achelek hazan, or the term hamargish, right? V'hasek ze ha'inyan, he says, and understand this, that man's nefesh is uniquely different than any other nefesh. Every living being has its own nefesh that is unique to it, right? And they can't be transferred, or you can't operate a human body with the nefesh of a cat, or you can't operate a cat's body with the nefesh of a human. It doesn't work. It's like installing Windows on a calculator. שהוא נפלא מאוד, ייכשלו בו הרבה מן המתפלספים. He says this is a wondrous thing that you need to really understand. Many of those who call themselves philosophers, those who think of themselves as intellectuals, a lot of them have fallen in this trap, because it's referred to as nefashot shonot or halakim shonim, and that the different halakim seem similar between different animals. And says, and as a result, from this misunderstanding that these so-called intellectuals have, because of hamitpalsefim and not philosophy, mitpalsefim are those who think of themselves as intellectuals, right? They have this conceit of intellectuals, but they don't really understand. As a result of that, they have many strange and wrong ideas. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the different parts of the nefesh, what each one is and what it does. First one, right? The metabolism. ממנו הכוח המושך והמחזיק והמעכל והדוחה המותרות והמגדל והמוליד בדומה. Right, so this part of the nefesh also has many functions to it, right? What does it do? It perceives the food, it separates, it extracts the energy from the food, it reproduces, it divides the cells, right? Says it divides the cells. It grows the different organs. And it processes the food in your stomach. And it gets rid of all the excess things, right? All the waste, right? It gets rid of all this is part of החלק הזן, והמבדיל הנחות עד שיפריש מה שראוי להיזון בו ומה שראוי לדחותו. And it separates the different qualities of the food. This is more going into, we'll say, ancient understanding of how do you call it? Of medicine, where there's different lehot, and it takes what it needs and it extracts what it doesn't need. And these 7 different functions of the Chelek Hazan, right, which is one of the 5 functions of the entire nefesh, right? Going into more detail about all this, right, and how they work, and what organs they use in order to execute their functions. יותר נראית ויותר גילויה, right? In what organs you see it more, you see it less. ומה מהם נמצא תמיד, what's always operating like a background process, which is always working. ומה יכלה מהם בזמן קצוב, and what parts of them only operate during certain times and don't operate during other times. זה כולו קשור למלאכת הרפואה, ואין צורך בו במקום הזה. All this, if you really want to understand it, you study medicine. Medicine deals with this Hanek Hazan in much, much more detail. This isn't the place to discuss more details of a Hanek Hazan. All right? Any questions so far? Okay. The Hanek Hamargish, the second part of the Nefesh. ממנו הכוחות חמישה המפורסמים אצל ההמון. Right? It has 5 main functions. These functions, or these functions are, the very well-known, famous among everybody. Everyone knows the 5 senses. Hare'iyah, sight, hashemi'ah, right? Sound, hata'am, taste, v'hareyah, smell, v'hamishush, right? And feel. והוא נמצא בכל שטח הגוף. This is in this חלק המישוש is spread out throughout the entire body, right? We know today that it's the nerve system, the nervous system. You have nerves everywhere, so you feel things everywhere. ואין לו איבר מיוחד כמו שיש לארבעת הכוחות. He says it doesn't have its own specific organ, such as like the others, like the eyes to see and the ears to hear, on the tongue to taste, right? It's spread out throughout the entire body. All right, so the Halek HaMargish is the part that processes all the input we get from our 5 senses in observing the world around us. The Halek HaMedameh, and this third part of the Nefesh, the third function, Hu HaKoach אשר יזכור רישומי המוחשים. החלק המדמה is the imagination. And its function is יזכור רישומי המוחשים אחר העלמה מקרבת החושים אשר השיגו. So the חלק המרגיש, right, it processes what you see. It's in front of you now. You see it. החלק המדמה is able to retain that impression in your mind. So once it's not in front of you, you see a beautiful flower, it's in front of you. The next day, you're somewhere else, it's not there, but you have a memory of that flower. That is the function of the Koach HaMedameh. V'yarkiv ketzatam im ketzatam. It's also able to assemble different things that you saw and put them together. V'yafrid kesatam mikesatam. It's also able to separate different parts of the things that you saw and perceived. All right? לפיכך, ירכיב זה הכוח מן הדברים אשר השיגום, דברים שלא השיגם כלל, ואי אפשר להשיגם. Right? So, we'll say one of the byproducts of this Koach HaMedameh, since it's able to put things together and separate it in the imagination, it could put 2 different things that it saw together that are impossible to actually ever be in existence. For instance, he sees a man and he sees a horse. And he puts it together. He makes, I don't remember the name of that animal, right? That mystical being, right? He says he's never seen that in real life, but he's able to imagine it, right? That's part of what the imagination does. And it's impossible for that something like that to actually exist. ואי אפשר להשיגם, כמו שידמה האדם ספינת ברזל רסה באוויר. It's the same way that a man can imagine a huge metal ship flying in the sky. Have you ever seen something like that? It may have been very difficult to imagine back then, because we call them airplanes today. But think of something like the Titanic. It's not aerodynamic. It has no wings. Doesn't fall into any any of the four forces that are operating on a plane. But yet it's still flying in the air, flying from one country to another. ואדם שראשו בשמיים ורגליו בארץ. A person can imagine a giant with his head is up in the clouds, in the skies, and his feet are down on earth. Can that ever actually be? He says, no, it's impossible. Or some sort of creature that has 1,000 eyes. Right? These are all things that the imagination can produce, but they're not necessarily grounded in reality. And many of these impossibilities, right? So the koach hamedameh, this imagination, is able to put them together and create them in the imagination. וכאן טעו המדברים, טעות מגונה גדולה. Says, כת המדברים, they were an Islamic philosophical cult. They're called Hamuta Kalimun, right? And they believed that anything that you can imagine can be. It's possible. אשר בנו עליה פינות הטעייתם בחלוקות המחויב והאפשר והנמנע, right? And a lot of their philosophy was derived from this belief that anything that the imagination can conjure up is possible. שהם חשבו או הביאו בני אדם לחשוב, that they thought or brought people to think, כי כל מדומה אפשר, that anything imagined is possible. So we discussed this in our class on free will and God's knowledge and free will, right? That there's three categories of reality, right? There is mihuyav hamesiut, things that have to exist, that existence can't live without. There's ifshari hamesiut, anything that's a possibility to exist, which is basically everything in our reality is ifshari hamesiut. Mihuyav hamesiut is only God. And there's nimna hamesiut, things that are impossible, can't possibly exist. So they kind of mixed up these categories because of this belief or misunderstanding of how koach hamedameh works. Ki kol medumeh efshar, right? Anything that is imagined is part of the category of possible in existence. ולא ידעו שזה הכוח ירכיב דברים שמציאותם נמנעת, כמו שזכרנו. And they did not understand that the imagination just puts things together, and it could be to a point where it puts things together that are impossible to exist in reality. So that's Ahirik Hamidameh. By the way, if any of you remember when we were discussing Nevuah, prophecy, Ahirik Hamidameh is extremely active in prophecy. And part of being a prophet is perfecting your koach hamedameh, right? Your creativity, your ability to put things together, but it needs to be guided in a way that you're able to differentiate between what is possible and what is impossible, what makes sense. So it needs to be guided by this chelek hasichni, and we'll discuss that in one of the later chapters. But in order to be a prophet, you really need to perfect your chelek hamedameh. That's one of the more active parts of the body. In fact, the reason why all the prophets get their prophecy when they're basically in a coma, knocked out, is they're knocking out the chelek hazan as much as possible, the chelek hamitorer as possible, the chelek hamargish is knocked out, right? And that'll allow the chelek hamedameh to work at full capacity. The chelek hamitorer, right? The part that has its cravings, its wants, its needs, Hu hakoach, this is the function, asher bo yishtokek ha'adam ledavar ma o ima'asehu. This is the part of the nefesh where man has a craving for something, he wants it, or ima'asehu, he's disgusted by it, he wants away from it. V'zeh hakoach yava'u pe'ulot ha'bakasha v'abriha. Right, and because of this function, the actions that are derived from this function are either running away or running towards, wanting something, going for something, or going away from something. Or the choosing of something, willing something, and choosing. You see this nice piece of chocolate or this chocolate cake, and you want it, and you go towards it. That's the koach hamitorer. והכעס וההתרצות והפחד והעוז והאכזריות והרחמנות והאהבה והשנאה, right, and also a rage and being peaceful, pacified, והפחד and being afraid, והעוז and courage, right, all of these emotions are all part of the חלק המתעורר והאכזריות והרחמנות, right, having mercy on someone or being cruel to someone. These are also parts of a חלק המתעורר, והאהבה והשנאה, and love and hatred, והרבה מאלו המקרים הנפשיים. וכלי אלו הכוחות, right, and what are the organs used for all of these functions? כל איברי הגוף, they use all the body parts, all organs are at their disposal. ככוח היד על התפיסה, right, that you have the hand that's able to catch things or take things, וכוח הרגל על ההליכה, right, and it could use your feet, your legs in order to go somewhere or to run away from something. וכוח העין על הראייה, right, and eyesight for vision. You want to look at something, there's something you want to see, something that caught your attention. וכוח הלב על העוז והפחד, right, and your heart, speed up your heartbeat if you're afraid or if you need to be courageous. וכן שאר האיברים, and so to all the other organs and body parts, הנסתרים והנראים, those that are obvious to us, in front of us, that you can see, and those that are more concealed, maybe the inner organs. אומנם הם וכוחותיהם כלים לזה הכוח המתעורר. All of these organs, all of our organs, they are all tools for the חלק המתעורר. So חלק המתעורר is really the one that actually controls our emotion, our movement, our bodies, not the way the חלק הזן, which is more internal processes. החלק המתעורר is more how we execute our will. And the fifth part, הכוח השכלי, right, the intellect, or הוא הכוח הנמצא לאדם אשר בו יסכים, right, this is the part of the nefesh where man can educate himself, where he can learn things, ובו תהיה ההתבוננות, ובו יקנה החוכמות, and that's where he can discover things. This is where he can learn different wisdoms, we'll see exactly where he can reflect and think. ובו יבחין בין המגונה והנאה מן הפעולות, and through this intellect, right, he can differentiate between what are good actions and what are bad actions. So החלק המתעורר, right, is what will execute your will, your actions. However, הכוח השכלי, your intellect, is what will differentiate and decide, is this craving that I have good, or should I not do it? Right? בו יבחין בין המגונה והנאה מן הפעולות, ואלו הפעולות, חלק מהן מעשי וחלק עיוני. Right? So this חלק השכלי, you could divide it into two as well. One is theoretical and one is practical. The ma'asi, right? So the practical parts of the حركة السخنية divided into theoretical and practical. The practical, mimeno melachti, umimeno machshavti, right? Part of it is melachti, is melachot, is actual like a trade, how to do something like practically, like labors, put like artistic things, put things together. Umimenu machshavti, and part of it is more thinking. And we'll see that the ha'iyuni, right, and the theoretical, asher bo yidah ha'adam hanimsaot she'enan mishtanot kefi ma shehen, right? The iyuni, the theoretical one, is where he can learn about like theoretical sciences, like mathematics and physics and biology. He learns the wisdom or the sciences, the philosophy of the world, right? Things that they're not changing, but the laws of physics, the laws of science. And these are what we refer to in general as chokmot, as wisdom or science. Right? And the melachti, what we said before, the more practical part, הוא הכוח אשר בו נלמד המלאכות, כמו נגרות ועבודת האדמה, right? That's the part of the nefesh that learns how to be, carpentry. You want to be a carpenter, it's a craft. You want to be a farmer, you learn how to process, toil the land, והרפואה, and medicine, והספנות, and how to, be a captain on a ship. The mahshavti, and the mahshavti part of it, right? It's the more planning part. You think about something, right? You have this, you're a carpenter, and you have this picture in your mind of this beautiful table, this beautiful woodwork, right? That the Koh HaMildameh put together because it saw two different things. And he said, you know what? I'm able to put these things together and actually craft something, and I'm going to figure out the plan of how I'm going to do it. Is it possible? Can I do it? Is it not possible? And if it is possible, you reach the conclusion it's possible, how am I going to execute it? How am I going to do it? And the execution of that plan will be through his chelik hamilachti, right? His more practical part of the chelik hasichli. All right, so those are the 5 parts of the nefesh. All right, this shiur mashiraui sheizkan minyan hanefesh, right? And this is the basic overview of man's nefesh, right? The 5 main functions, what each one is responsible for, what other functions are derived from those main functions, and this basically covers just about most of what man does, feels, sees, behaves, and everything. Any questions so far before we move on to the concluding paragraph of the chapter? Okay. V'da says, and you should know this, understand this. Shezot hanefesh ha'achat asher kadam sipur kochoteha, right? That this one unified nefesh, which we have detailed now, its different functions, its different parts. This is like material. והשכל לסורה. And the intellect, not החלק השכלי, because the חלק השכלי is part of this nefesh that is כחומר, like a material. It says והשכל, the intellect, meaning the intellect that one can acquire, לסורה, is the essence of the nefesh. ואם תקנה לה הסורה, right? And if it acquires this surah, תהיה מציאות הכנה שבאה לקיבול הסורה ההיא לבטלה. אם לא תקנה לה הסורה. Right? So, if you remember, these are philosophical terms. Surah and um, mikrim. There's two different types of characteristics that two terms that the philosophers use when characterizing things. So, for instance, you have a table. Table has many different characteristics to it. It could be made of wood. It could be made of plastic. It could be made of glass. It could be made of stone. It could be made of anything. It could be white. It could be black. It could have any different color, right? None of those characteristics are essential to what makes a table, right? So those are called mikrim. Surah is what is the characteristic that defines what this thing is, what makes a table, what makes a chair, right? That is the surah. It says, what makes man's nefesh? What is the essential part of man's nefesh? Or what really, we're saying, what makes man or human? It's this acquisition of the sechel, acquiring this higher intellect. Now, when we studied about Senem Elohim, the image of God, right? He says, Nefesh kol basar isurato shenatan lo ha'el. We said that the nefesh of any living being basically defines the essence of that being, right? What makes a dog a dog? Well, it's all the characteristics that are unique to a dog, right? Which is defined really by the nefesh of the dog, right? So nefesh kol basar, right? Every living creature has its nefesh. Isurato shenatan lo ha'el. That is the surah, the essence of that being, right? That God gave him. Nefesh kol basar isurato shenatan lo ha'el. Right? It says, והדעת היתרה המסויה בנפשו של אדם, right, in this extra understanding and intellect that is present in the nefesh of man, היא צורת האדם השלם בדעתו, right? That is the essence of a man who has acquired knowledge, השלם בדעתו, who has acquired good, substantiated knowledge. היא צורתו שנתן לו האל, הדעת היתרה מסויה בנפשו של אדם, היא צורת האדם השלם בדעתו. ועל צורה זו נאמר, he says, and on this essential quality of acquiring the sechel in the nefesh of man, על צורה זו נאמר, נעשה אדם בצלמנו כדמותנו. We shall make man in our image, in our likeness. ואם לא תיכנע הסורה, right, and if you do not acquire this surah, this essential characteristic of man's nefesh, right, this da'at yetera, this extra understanding, right, תהיה מציאות ההכנה שבה לכיוון הסורה ההיא לבטלה, right, then this tool that we have, this chenek hasichni that we have, which is ready to acquire this da'at yetira, right? Its whole existence was in vain. It was for nothing. V'ke'inu yimitziut heaven, as if it's just like a passing, temporary existence. It has no intrinsic value to it. There's no eternal value to it. And the nefesh of this person was a waste. Vehu omro, and this is what Shlomo says in Mishle, gam belo da'at nefesh lo tov, right? And if there's a nefesh that does not acquire da'at, right, understanding, lo tov, this is not good. It's not real. It's not good. It's not sustainable. It is sunin omar shemitziut nefesh, right? This is what am I saying? He says that the existence of a nefesh, shelo tikaneh surah, that does not acquire this surah, lo tiyeh nefesh, ela tiyeh nefesh belo da'at, right? However, it's just a nefesh without any understanding, without any da'at, lo tov, it's no good. However, discussing what is surah, right? What is essential, these philosophical terms of the essential characteristic of any entity, the right? And the material side of anything, and what are these knowledges, these understandings, but he's already hinting when he says Sechanim over here. He's called Sechanim Nivdanim, these, which we have already explained to be these abstract concepts, right? Could be the concepts, let's say, of love, could be even mathematics, finance, all these abstract things that you learn to understand, and let's say mercy, right? And to incorporate into your behavior and make it part of your nefesh, right? So all these things, we're really discussing them more in depth. How do you acquire them? This isn't the place for it. Here we just want to explain what the nefesh is and how it works. And we're not going to need this to understand how to perfect your midot. Right? This is more compatible, this is more mat'im to discuss in the book on Nevuah, which I mentioned that I'm going to write. Which, side note between us, he never actually wrote. He kind of just incorporated it into his book, The Guide for the Perplexed. All right, and this is where I'll end this chapter, and we'll start another. Right, so we were designed with a nefesh that has 5 main functions. All these 5 functions are part of one unified nefesh. They take care of our bodily processes. They process input from the world around us. They put things together, right? This is where we have our cravings, our will, our wants. This is where we learn things. But the main point, the essence of the nefesh, of all of this, is to acquire the special knowledge from God and incorporate it, make our nefesh behave in accordance to that. All right, and we'll discuss that more and how we do that in further chapters. All right, but a nefesh that doesn't aspire to that, doesn't achieve that, says, oh, it's a wasted nefesh. It's a wasted life. It's life on earth. Was temporary. It came, it went, it's not remembered, it's gone, it was a waste. All right, and we are going to learn how to acquire this knowledge, how to perfect our midot, so that we can acquire this knowledge. Now, why is it so essential that all these 5 functions of the nefesh are really just part of a one unified nefesh? Says, well, if it's all one nefesh, then if one part of the nefesh gets sick, says you can cure it by curing your nefesh. Basically, he's saying tikkun hamidot, right? Anytime you do tikkun hamidot, it'll affect your entire nefesh. It'll affect your creativity and your imagination. It can even affect your metabolism. It can affect your cravings. It can affect the way you process and think of the world. So, for instance, the Rambam, he brings an interesting halakha. He says that Reshut Kol Adam Netuna Lo. In Hilchot Teshuvah, he says, man has free will, he can do what he wants. Right? Reshut Kol Adam Netuna Lo. Im yirtzeh liot tzaddik, right? Reshut beyado. Im yirtzeh liot rasha, Reshut beyado. He wants to be righteous, he's able to. He wants to be wicked, he's able to. And then he goes into all the different characteristics of man. Ochila Yoshua, you could be generous or you can be stingy, right? And he says, Oh Hacham, Hosacham. He says you can also be wise or you can be a fool. He says, well, I don't know. I know some people who they try really hard. You say they try hard, they study hard and everything, but they have difficulty, they have like a barrier, something's blocking their understanding. So how is it up to man's will? Sometimes it's just a matter of his understanding. He says, no, well, it's all part of the nefesh. If you work on your nefesh, you fix your midot, which you do have control over. You have control over your actions, and your actions affect your midot. Your midot affect your nefesh, and your nefesh affects your intellect. So just do the right things, behave properly. For instance, if a person is arrogant, that's a barrier before wisdom, because he can't learn from anybody. If a person is impatient, that's a midah that he can work on and perfect, and that will prepare him to receive this wisdom of God. So it all comes down to understanding that the nefesh is one entity. Anything you do to cure the nefesh will cure the entire nefesh. And anything you do to ruin your nefesh can affect your entire nefesh. And that's basically today's lesson. If there's any questions.
Yes, I would have a question about
Yes, please.
these darts. If you don't acquire dart, then you waste your life. Is it for the animals they can acquire dart, or it is only for the humans?
So this is just, he says, when he's talking about the dot is acquired through the chelek hasichli, right? This is more unique to man. Because this dot isn't just like knowledge of, I don't know, a beaver building a dam and how a bee builds his beehive, right? Which is also, you know, it's a melacha, it's a chokhmah, right? It is a wisdom. But this da'at that he's talking about, this da'at yetira, is, we've discussed in our previous course, is more able to understand or conceptualize abstract ideas and translate it into a way of life, right? So being merciful, for understanding what is mercy. Mercy isn't a tangible entity. It's an abstract idea, right? Acquiring these understandings, or like the Yud Gimel Midot, for instance, Rahum, Hanun, Erech Hapayim, Rav Chesed, Ve'emet, right? Or how Yirmiyahu ends, you know, he says, Kim bazot ithalel hamitalel. This is what man should take pride in. Askel v'yado alti, right? Understanding and learning me. Ki ani Hashem, for I am God. Oseh chesed mishpat uzdaka ba'aris. I am God who performs justice, right? Charity and chesed in the world. That means I want you to understand me as much as possible. Meaning, understand how I guide this world through Chesed, Mishpat, and Tzedakah, and translate that into your midot. And that's how your nefesh acquires this da'at. And this is something that's unique to man. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very much.
All right, excellent. Thank you for the question. Anybody else? Okay, so this is where we'll finish for today. Finish the first chapter of the 8, and hopefully next week, or next week is Chag. No, next week is, I think, is Erev Chag.
Yeah, Erev Chag, no classes.
No class next week. Okay, beseder.
Thank
If
you
it's
so
Erev
much.
Chag, then we should be studying all night.
Yeah, that's what you have to do. That's true.
That's an idea.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.